Hello, what's up community? I share with you another story of an attack by what we believe were demonic entities, an attack that my fellow sailors and I suffered on a training mission in the Caribbean Sea region, approximately 2 years ago in 1 month. July, 9 comrades and I had the turn to receive training in combat operations in jungle areas. On this occasion our unit was transported to a jungle located very close to the Caribbean Biosphere Reserve. The place is between a lagoon called the San Martin Volcano, an area that is difficult to access by land. There are no roads or dirt. So my unit was transported by means of Sikorsky-type transport helicopters, from the naval base to the aforementioned training place. The exercise consisted of my unit training in search and combat operations for criminal and drug trafficking cells in jungle areas, using only indications received by radio from an amphibious assault operations ship, located on the coast near a beach that called Split Rock Point. It is worth mentioning that we were all equipped with everything necessary for training, including assault rifles, pistols, fragmentation grenades, etc., all our field equipment, optical, electronic, night vision and communications equipment. On the first night of training at approximately 2,300 hours, very strange and inexplicable things began to happen around our camp. Our ground-level motion sensors and others installed in the trees surrounding our camp began to register errors and launch alerts about something or someone that was within the security perimeter of the camp. This security perimeter is an area that is monitored by means of sensors, and it is the area that is the furthest round from the base camp. I also remember something that I really missed was that we began to feel a drastic drop in temperature, something very rare in the jungle and much more so in summer. We also began to perceive nauseating odors similar to rotten eggs and drainage, and perceiving these odors caused us surprise, since according to the maps we had there were no swamps or lagoons nearby from which pestilential gases could come. The Majagua Lagoon was about 50 kilometers from our camp, so it was almost impossible for putrefactive gases to come from it. The night passed and my companions, the Marines, were in charge of guarding the camp, the first 3 hours while the rest of us rested. One of the Marines looked very uneasy. He continually shined his rifle lamp on the trees, the undergrowth and the ground that was around him, commented that it was more or less 1 in the morning when the Marine saw a shadow approaching him. He did not feel afraid until he realized that it had no feet. Although he had his rifle loaded and ready to be used, he did not try to lift it against what his eyes were observing. It was the size of a person. It was advancing slowly, but it was coming straight towards me, and it did so without resting on the ground, floating. It came floating. The surprised sailor mentioned that about 10 meters before this shadow would arrive at the point where he was, he saw how this thing jumped about 5 or 6 meters towards the trees to get lost in the darkness. Something that evidently surprised him greatly and left him bewildered. He was guarding another area of the camp when suddenly he began to feel that they threw stones and branches from around the vegetation, believing that we, their companions, were playing a joke on them, but that was not the case. Fear invaded the sailor, when suddenly he felt a very strong blow that knocked him down. He tried to get up but could not. A force kept him oppressed without being able to get up from where he was. He wanted to scream, he felt like he did, but apparently none of us heard him, not even the other companion who was on guard at that time. All of us who were in the camp knew that something was happening when we heard a loud bang followed by a gunshot. The detonation woke us up. We all got up with the rifle and ready, because we thought that armed criminals were looking for us. The only thing we heard and could see was the flapping of a large shadow he walked away between the trees. He looked like a huge bird, or so it seemed to all of us. We arrived at the area where the Marine was on guard to help him, and we saw that he was still on the ground without moving with a wound on his face. We asked him what had happened and he told us that a shadow had attacked him and paralyzed him. He told us that with great effort he was able to activate his rifle to alert everyone else and for them to help him. We took the companion to a tent so that the medical officer who accompanied us could attend to him. After the attack we all decided to stay awake, in case another similar attack occurred, and thus be able to respond to the aggression of whatever had attacked our companion. The paranormal events were just beginning. We decided to take turns to scan the entire surroundings of the camp with night vision goggles. We saw 8 humanoid figures, or at least that's what it seemed like, surrounding the camp. What surprised me was that they seemed to be standing there staring in our direction with black eyes, as if they knew we were there. The night vision, I want to clarify, allows us to see the environment even in extremely dark conditions, like it was almost daylight. It was very dark, there was no moonlight, so there was no way for them to know we were there, unless they also had some type of night vision or infrared technology. A comrade ran to alert the unit commander that we were surrounded by these strange unidentified people, while I and 2 other comrades, upon seeing that they had penetrated within the security perimeter of our camp, where we could use lethal force, opened fire and emptied them. Those silhouettes, all the magazine of our rifles. We wanted to check that we had hit the target, and again using night vision we checked the place where we had shot. We did not see anything of those silhouettes, thinking that they had fled, so we decided to group up with the other companions. When suddenly we heard other colleagues calling us on the radio requesting that we support them because they were seeing shadows that were moving among the trees menacingly. We arrived and we could actually see through the darkness that the trees were moving in a way that seemed like they were shaking them. With some enormous force, we decided to group them all in the center of the camp and stay together to face the threat. We began to feel very afraid of facing them, dark forces that we did not understand and did not know how to combat. The shadows that moved between the trees began to uttering eerie screams that made us feel a terrible chill, and panic spread among us. With the night vision goggles we found that there were already around 20 humanoid silhouettes that were on the ground, and in the trees surrounding us and staring at us with those terrifying black eyes. 2 of my companions began to shout that they were demons, that we should get out of there, and suddenly 2 of these entities began to move very quickly towards us. My companions and I did not hesitate and began to shoot, without lying to them. We fired a round of about 100 shots at those things, but the shots only made these entities stop their movement and jump towards the trees. They continued watching, and we were afraid and bewildered. We did not know how to fight against these things, against these demonic entities that they were harassing and attacking us. We were surrounded, and in the middle of the jungle there was no nearby population where we could flee. We only had 2 options. One was to resist the attack and onslaught of these entities as best we could, or to request support by radio from the security ship. Coast and urgently request that a helicopter come to take us out of that place, and my clock was 430 hours in the morning. If we could resist 1 more hour it would begin to dawn, and those things would surely return to the place where they came from. The shadows continued staring at us with those demonic eyes and a macabre smile, uttering grotesque howls that made us feel as if our chests were squeezing with fear. The colleague in charge of the radio, in a panic attack, requested helicopter support from the naval operations ship, which was on the coast about 100 kilometers away, but received no response. It was as if electromagnetic interference prevented transmission. We knew then that we had no radio communication and we were isolated from our base. One of our companions with knowledge of Santeria and white magic shouted to all of us that we had to cross the bullets with a knife, mark the ogives of the cartridges with a cross, and at the moment of shooting we thought that God was with us and that we did not have any demon, and our fear was so much we decided to try this resource in order to get rid of those demons that harassed us. We hurriedly proceeded to cross the bullets from our weapons with our knives, insert them into our base magazines to shoot. When we all had our weapons ready with the cartridges crossed at the order of the commanding officer of our unit, we fired, at the same time towards the entities located in the trees. When we fired, we shouted that we are going with all our strength and that we had no demons, that they will get away. From there, when we did it, the branches of the trees began to move very strongly, and all the vegetation, as if a very strong wind was hitting them. We could see that those things began to jump from treetop to treetop, moving away from us until they disappeared. At night it regained its natural noises and calm again, the radio transmissions began to work again, and for fear that those things would return, in the remainder of the night the leading officer of the unit informed by radio to the operations ship that the area was not certain that we had been attacked by unidentified entities, and requested that a helicopter be immediately moved to our position to pick us up and take us back to the operations ship. Our base replied that a helicopter would come to pick us up as appropriate, since at night it was dangerous for a helicopter and its crew to move. All my colleagues and I were really physically and mentally disturbed by the paranormal event we had faced. We had wounds, slight bruises on the skin, our uniform had tears, and all we still had a bad headache. I don't understand how it came about. The remaining time of the night we all spent together with such attention and anguish that some of my companions began to pray and invoke God's protection as soon as dawn broke. We were glad to be still alive, and we proceeded to set up our entire camp and almost run out of that damned place and reach a clearing in the jungle to be able to find the helicopter, which would take us back to the operations ship. Upon arrival, we reported what happened in the operations log. Our captain reviewed the report and told us that we were not the only ones who had reported these normal events, and training practices in that area told us that other training groups had reported being attacked by witches or wolves, and they attributed it to that in that area there are many witches, sorcerers who practice black magic, and who use these dark techniques to protect territories or domains controlled by drug traffickers and criminals who operate in that area. This type of information is never made known publicly and is considered confidential, but it exists in the archives of the Navy and other armed and security institutions. To this day I still cannot find a rational explanation for these terrifying events that I experienced together with my companions.